All right. Excited to be here today on another S2G podcast. And if I'm being honest, most of what's in the news these days are these dominant AI stories about how NVIDIA or OpenAI or Oracle, Google, whoever are doing these massive $100 billion deals with each other. And I've got two of our entrepreneurs here, Shail Khiyara and Adam Greenberg, who I'm excited to talk to a little bit about how all this is impacting and getting its time and space in food and agriculture, because we think there's tremendous opportunities. It just made sense for us to talk about how agriculture and AI are sort of, helping these businesses compete. And so, the agriculture industry is low margins, it's heavily regulated, long sales cycles, perishable products, an oligopolistic market structure, and built on physical assets and annual growing cycles. And so there's a lot of challenges that sort of moves AI out from, quote unquote, just a technology, something that serves us an ad a little bit better or summarizes a document, to really thinking about how is it applied to industry and application. And food and ag has had some challenges lately: depressed commodity prices, persistently elevated input costs, higher interest rates, climate change. We heard Christina talk about all those recently and how it's impacting the farmers and agriculture in general. And so, with that, I'd love for each of you to quickly introduce yourself and talk a little bit about how each of you are applying AI. And Shail, maybe let's start with you. You can bring in your background around AI and just tell us a little bit more about what you do and what Swarm does.
Yeah, happy to do that, Chuck. Thank you for the opportunity, Chuck, and the S2G team. So, look, I actually started out as a civil structural engineer, and I've always had the instinct to build things that last. And early in my career, that meant bridges and buildings, and later it became systems and companies. So, over the years, I've worked in public and private companies across intelligent automation, AI, transformation, helping organizations figure out how to use technology, not just to do things, but to do things in a different manner. And what pulled me to Swarm was the idea that agriculture is the ultimate complexity puzzle. You've got biology, you've got logistics, you've got weather, you've got markets, all of them moving at once. And it's one of the few industries where volatility isn't a bug, it's the environment. And Swarm is really about helping farmers and agri-food companies reason through that volatility. So instead of rigid plans that fall apart when something changes, we build digital twins and systems that can adapt, that can say, give me the new weather data or the price shift or the truck schedules that have changed, and here's the best move. So what Swarm essentially does, it's a decision intelligence company, but at its heart, it's about helping organizations make sense of uncertainty. And every day, the farmers and agri-food companies are, facing hundreds of interconnected decisions: what to plant, where to process, when to ship, how to price, how to adapt when something breaks. Most of these systems were not designed for this level of complexity, and AI plays a huge role in that. And that's where Swarm comes in.
Yeah, that's there's so many decisions and how they interact with each other that it just is impossible to know this sort of prior to these types of systems or to what you're doing, for sure. Adam, tell us a little bit about your background. So, pun intended, deep roots in the greenhouse industry. How are you seeing computer vision and AI improve the outcomes for, greenhouse growers?
Yeah, appreciate the question, Chuck, and thanks for having me. The background that I'm coming from, really the perspective I'm coming from, my father's been in the plant business my whole life. I used to compete for attention between the orchids and myself going to school. So for me, it was always personal around plants. And before that, I worked at Amazon, and back in the early days, 2010, 2011, and learned a lot about what operational excellence looks like there. Started a water business and reverse osmosis and membranes, and then started this business in ways to optimize both the value chain, the supply chain, and the greenhouse itself, and doing that through many different types of AI, right? Whether it's computer vision or whether it's just machine learning, CNNs or transformers, or whether it's now with LLMs using different types of AI to drive value across that value chain. Specifically, when we got started, we focused a lot on the greenhouse itself. Everything was manual and disconnected. And so UNU, spelled IUNU, is a company that's focused primarily on ways to drive new types of insights from new types of data using AI and machine learning within the operation for the greenhouse grower. And so that means matching supply and demand between and forecasting with higher accuracy, finding issues early, or even helping steer the plant balance and cultural practices, also known as labor management, to be able to drive the highest quality and the highest yield you can. That's custom to each location and geographic perspective, whether it's through weather or the specific type of greenhouse they built. So AI has really been a great way to be able to deliver that customization. It feels custom and bespoke, but on the back end, the models are very, very similar and they can optimize themselves for each location. And then from just a pure LLM perspective, it's been nice to be able to add in certain types of recommendations and analysis on top of the already existing AI data. And so that's allowed us to build things like chatbots and voice conversations between our customers and their data themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting because digitization for ag took a while. It certainly was a slower adopter, and ag does seem to be adopting AI a little bit slower than some of the other industries out there. Although there are signs that that's accelerating, and so we see some of the challenges in the past. Price point of some of these tools, they are sort of new and trying to figure out which ones actually work and there's real value, and which ones aren't going to be sort of taken over by the LLMs, before too long. You got, demographics where I think a lot of people, don't want to learn new things or are comfortable in their ways. They've worked for a long, long time, a lot of point siloed point solutions, and then, just sort of, deterministic challenges or just deterministic software versus sort of AI and its predictive software. And so, Shail, you've talked in the past about new ways of thinking and addressing some of these complexities. What mindset shifts are required within, to be able to do things like digital twins as a concept that, sort of everyone up and down the organization can sort of understand, and other AI solutions that, happen along the supply chain and sort of with, these large companies?
Yeah, look, that's a fair question, Chuck. I think adoption in agriculture has been slower, but I like to think it's not because the industry lacks ambition. I think it's because it's really built on reality. The shift that's happening now within ag-based AI or even industrial AI, for that matter, is that it's about making sure that systems listen before they decide. I often say, agriculture is slow to adopt. Is not really slow to adopt. It's just allergic to nonsense, and really getting down to the heart of the matter and showing the value to the customers is critically important. So, digital twins and AI brings a completely different mindset. For years we've tried to manage the uncertainty in agriculture with static tools and fixed plans, and that's the gap. We have managed it with spreadsheets, forecasts, and I would say a lot of hope. And resilience in agriculture is about decision options, not hope on a spreadsheet. And when you take something simple, a grower trying to decide when to irrigate, or a co-op trying to decide which plant to run next week, or a harvest trying to find the best possible allocation to maximize profit and minimize waste. Digital twins and AI, you can see them. You can see the impact before you act. You can test a dozen what if scenarios, weather changes, labor shortages, and know which path gives you the best outcome before you spend a dollar or lose a day. And I think that's critically important. It's not about replacing experience, it's about amplifying it and pairing judgment with speed, intuition, and computation. And that's when AI stops being a tool and starts becoming a partner. I think the real edge in agriculture won't belong to the biggest players anymore. It'll really belong to the fastest learner, the one who can turn uncertainty into advantage. And that's where digital twins and AI play a huge role.
Yeah, I think there's tremendous opportunities with the flexibility of what sort of AI brings to these operators at the front line. Like you said, I don't think it's about replacing people. It's about augmenting and enhancing their capabilities so that they can make
Right.
decisions that are accurate. There's tremendous amount of efficiency gains in that. So I think just amazing. So, and then Adam, from your vantage point, working across hundreds of facilities out there globally, what have you learned about implementation, and how do you describe, like, are there opportunities to, are you seeing growers adopt at a much faster rate, and sort of seeing the pickup here?
Yeah, I think the it's a good question because the adoption rate is relative to the products around the market and the level of, let's just call it, uncertainty around who to believe is becoming harder and harder. So you see sort of two different aspects of this. One, farmers take the largest risk of anyone every single year because they literally bet the farm every year on these crops, right? And they're biological good. And when they do that, we're seeing that people are intentionally spending the time to trial and adopt technologies that include AI because they know they need it, but they don't know how they need it. And because there are so many different companies now using the word AI, it's almost like what cloud used to be. The word AI is becoming so buzzwordy that it creates a lot of noise. And so what we've really found that's been beneficial is we don't focus on AI anymore. We focus on the outcome, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so AI is good for a lot of things. The way we talk about it is based on yield assurance, right? If you have X amount of volatility, we want to cut your variance in half, right? And we can stand behind it financially. We can stand behind it through our product. We can stand behind it through our references. And by having people feel like you understand them, and you're just using AI as a tool to solve some of their problems, that's how we spend most of our time communicating these days. Because at the beginning of the AI conversation, it was easy to be able to talk about AI and have them get excited. Today, AI has been used so much that it's just another part of the word salad. And so we've had to focus on AI as a tool and help them get to the outcome they want and work backwards.
Yeah, I feel like internally I've tried to use AI as an expression less and less, and really focus on what the outcomes are, what the changes that are happening are, so that people can really think about it from the work context that they're in. And obviously context is one of the most important things here,
Mm-hmm.
as we sort of talk about the capabilities that they have, and sort of being predictive and stuff. So I think it's that whole um, piece of, here's this general intelligence tool that can do everything, to really getting into what are the specifics that the very specific needs that you have or challenges that you have, and being deliberate about going after those specific needs and challenges. So Shail, how do you think about, like, how companies should be starting to embrace AI, and in these scenarios? We talked a little bit about sort of these general knowledges, but now it's sort of going into individual, very specific problems that they're going after. How do they think about identifying the problems where they're at, and start to go after all that?
Yeah, a lot of it starts with really addressing the individual processes that they have in the organization. Of course, one would say a lot of it starts with data itself as well, right? And I think there are enough silos on the field that we don't necessarily want silos in our data as well. But in some instances, agriculture data is siloed. So it's about having access to that data. It's about being able to normalize and rationalize that data. And then it's about identifying what specific business problems are you trying to solve, whether it's supply chain, whether it's logistics, whether it's workforce planning, whether it's harvest allocation, as an example. We work with companies that have various different maturity levels of problems that they have within the organization, and we go in and help them identify which particular ones do they want to solve first. And often it's either problems that are impacting margin, but the data is not in good shape, or there's low hanging fruit and the data is in great shape, and you can apply simple AI capabilities to that. Like, for example, a RAG based LLM that is very specific to your organization, that draws all the information into a central repository, and you're able to query it and get information at a much faster pace. So we see varying levels of problem sets within organizations. I do think there is a strong interest that I'm seeing in the market from organizations wanting someone to come in and help be a partner rather than a software vendor. Don't throw software over the wall, but partner with us to figure out which particular problem sets should we solve first.
Yeah. And Adam, from a multimodal standpoint, I mean, you see a lot of different data types. You see a lot of different, I think said silos of data throughout an organization. How do you help bring that together to create, sort of decisions at the front line? How do you, because that's one of the real advantages to AI these days, is that it does allow you to look at, again, very diverse sets of data and make logic out of them.
Yeah, I think it both presents a problem and an opportunity. The major problem being so disparate is the integration problem and the standardization problem, where people from the input perspective really struggled to put it all together. And initially we struggled to find ways to standardize it and put it together, because people would speak different languages, have different metrics, but they were all trying to say the same thing. They're all trying to measure the same thing, but they all do it in different ways. And then on the output side, we find that the outputs originally were moving from a 2010 BI dashboard style world to I want immediate gratification, right? And so people have higher expectations with the products that they're getting. And so not only do you have to integrate it from a, let's just call it multi-experience perspective, they want to be able to communicate, whether it's verbally, whether it's written, whether it's on their phone, or whether it's on their computer. They want the fastest way to get the insights, and they no longer expect themselves to do the analysis. They expect you to do the analysis to make it so that they just can get a quick answer to be able to unblock time, right? And in business to business enterprises, you've really three options. Two specifically, you can save them money or you can save them time. And then on the third option, every once in a while, you can say peace of mind, but that's hard to sell on. And so for us, it's about how are we going to save them time, and how are we going to help them remain profitable and be successful for generations to come. And that comes from an experience now with a much higher expectation. So as much as everyone says, wow, it must be easier with AI, the expectations from the output perspective have gotten a lot higher, and you no longer have the ability to ship it quickly and hope and break a bunch of things and hope that it works. You now have to get it right the first time, because the expectations now are so much higher than they've ever been before.
Yeah. And then how do you standardize that sometimes across multiple different customers or customer types that, allow you to scale as a business as well? That just, being able to, because it is so adaptable and so quick moving that it does make it tough to, by the time something, you've sort of, locked down the feature set, you've rolled it out, 3, 4, 6 weeks later, there's new additions you can do to it. And so, figuring out how to manage that rate of diffusion out in the market is just really tough. And so one of the things I want to talk about is sort of the concept of this idea. And, and we didn't talk about this in the pre, but I sort of see there being, and this isn't my language, this is someone else, but I'm embracing it. And so there's sort of AI resistant, AI neutral, AI forward, AI first, and AI native, right? Like that's the spectrum that you sort of see. Are you seeing what's giving companies confidence to move from sort of neutral to forward to AI first, and then ultimately potentially AI? Like maybe talk about your organizations, and I know maybe Adam, you were doing machine learning out of the gate, and have transitioned more aggressively towards sort of not pure AI, but other forms of AI. and then your customers have also been on this journey. So what has it been like for you guys to go through that journey?
If for us, it's been what I like to call the breadcrumb trail, which is to get to the outcome, you have to help people get there, and it has to be their excitement and their idea. So for us, when we deal with the breadcrumb trail, we're doing a lot of analysis. Back to the multimodal question, really, when we're taking imagery and we're finding insights on plants, but you're also integrating what they already have today, which is the climate, the irrigation, the weather, and you put that all together. They don't always believe what's in the imagery. The analysis says it's this. Well, I think it's that. And you start to realize in that reconciliation happens through the breadcrumb trail of, okay, let's go measure it together, right? And so you help them go do it. Or in our case, let's surface the imagery. They can count the number of tomatoes. They can count the number of oh, you don't have any ripe tomatoes to pick today. You guarantee it. Here's some examples of your imagery of where you have 5% of the plant ready to harvest. That level of prove it, then once you do that 2, maybe 3 times, they stop doing that and they move from being AI reluctant to AI excited. And then once they start to get excited about it, if you can win and by giving them actual good answers 2 or 3 times after that, then they almost become AI native thinkers, right? So you have to breadcrumb them through it, because a lot of times they rely on you to be the one to do it. As I say to a lot of people now, we're no longer selling software as a service. We're selling software and service, right? And in farming, it's all about the relationship. And so we have to be focused on the service to be able to give them the outcome they want to help them become AI native. If you say, hey, what do you want to be out of all the ones you just mentioned? Do you want to be AI native and be able to get the most out of AI? Everybody will say yes. But if you look at the theory of diffusion, right, Everett Rogers, or the crossing the chasm, you'll notice that only 17% of the population are innovators, early adopters. So how do you get people there? You have to use the breadcrumb trail, customer success, relationships, subject matter experts, and being right a lot with AI to be able to move them from reluctant or late adopters into power users and AI native. And that's the responsibility of companies like ours to help get them there.
Yeah, and the opportunity, responsibility plus the opportunity to do that. Shail, you guys started off a little bit more AI first, if not AI native. Talk to us about that, like because you're coming up and talking to companies that are maybe AI neutral or maybe a little AI forward, and you're trying to convince them, what's possible, and how do you, and you're a small team. Which to me, that's a huge advantage in the opportunity here. But how have you sort of gone to market and really had to interface with these large organizations to help them sort of think about, AI, if not AI first, but even AI, moving towards AI first or AI native?
Yeah, I think I would echo a few things that Adam just said, right? I think the vertical specific AI is a single biggest differentiator for us in the market. Being able to understand the space, being able to understand whether it's a fruit harvest scenario and we're moving tons of fruit, or whether we're moving 2.5 million chickens a week, or whether we're moving 15,000 people a day to go pick and ship berries. That SME expertise, the vertical specific expertise, is critically important. But when I talk to customers, there's a trend that I'm seeing of how customers are moving to becoming more AI native and strong users of AI. And this trend really falls into sort of 4 buckets, which I sort of pulled together as an acronym called MATE, because that's really what it is. It's a mate, your ally in the field. The M stands for multimodal. Customers want to see that AI just doesn't read data; it can actually see and sense data. So it's about drone imagery, it's about soil sensors, it's about satellite weather. When we talk to mining companies, it's all about geospatial information that they want to be able to pull in. A is clearly agentic. This is where AI starts reasoning, and it doesn't wait for you to ask. It runs scenarios on its own. It's like, for example, how to adjust feed when commodity prices spike. or rerouting trucks when a storm is about to hit. It's not passive intelligence; it's active partnership. So that's all falls under the A bucket, the agentic. T is for trustworthy, and this is coming up a lot with customers. They just don't want a number. They just don't want the optimization. They also want to know why, the explainability, the context around it. And this trustworthy AI explains the reasoning, shows the trade-offs, and learns from the operator's input. So T is a critical component in this in these four areas. And then the E is really about interoperability. No one wants another silo. They want it edge enabled as well. We're seeing intelligence move from the cloud to the combine itself, literally. And that means decision happens in real time. Moisture alerts, for example, before spoilage, routing changes before delays. So that's what I'm sort of seeing is that acronym of MATE in the market.
So how do you think that you can, what are the keys to really accelerating the adoption of these systems? I mean, Adam, you talked a little bit about breadcrumbs, but elaborate more, like what's going to be the breaking point to where suddenly, there's, you move from that AI neutral to AI forward to AI first? Like what is going to cause that slip that happens?
You're either going to break your own system and processes because somebody's going to retire, or you're going to try to scale, or you're going to prepare yourself for the ability to scale or the ability to handle your subject matter expert to retire, right? The average age of the grower is above 55. In the greenhouse industry, it's even higher. These are the experts. When they retire, your kids aren't going to school to become greenhouse growers who want to work 7 days a week, 360 days a year. So you sort of have two options. You can do it through pain, or you can do it through excitement, innovation, opportunity. Both ways, you end up with the same outcome. And so the way we talk about it from just sort of getting them there is, if we can solve some pain points for you that are quick and easy for you to get excited about, what other problems would you want to solve? And then slowly but surely, they peel back, they build their own playbook, right? Again, it feels custom to them, but it's bespoke in the fact that we can reuse a lot of our own models. And when you peel back every layer of the onion to them, they then lean in more and more as it keeps doing what it needs to do. And then I think from a human in the loop perspective, it's important, because if you get one or two things wrong from an AI perspective, they use it as vindication, and it loses a lot of trust. And so when we deliver a lot of our LLM wrap solutions, not just the AI side where we do the ray tracing, and we do let's just call it LLM incapable AI, when we look at cameras and build 3D models, we're talking about LLMs themselves because they hallucinate. To get that right has been a lot harder because it has so many ways it can go wrong. And so you have to be able to initially work with them to get good answers and guarantee good answers before you get to something that can give wrong answers 1 out of every 100 times. And so it's that building of trust, because they inherently, what's the second oldest or first oldest profession in the world, right? And people have been trying to sell them snake oil for 4,000 years. And so they're very skeptical inherently, and they should be, because of how much at risk they have every single year when they do their crop. And in order to build that trust and maintain that trust, requires a lot of really a multimodal approach of helping them both with imagery to gain trust, being on site to help them, and also working with them with their data to be able to see the power of it. And that's how you get the breadcrumb trail to work in a way that is, let's just say, oftentimes counterintuitive, because people think technology should mean that it's easier to be able to deliver. But the reality is AI is a tool. It's still the relationship and the people in agriculture that make the decisions.
Yeah, it's going to cause people to, spend a lot of time thinking through, more thinking probably than they're used to, because they're going to be more that critical need more times a day, where that human in the loop really does add value, when all the sort of benign, repeatable stuff has been taken out of that process. And then to your point on, we recently had an event here in San Francisco where, Waymo hit a cat that was, I guess, I don't know whose cat it was. It was a fairly well-liked cat, I guess, and certainly a terrible thing. But at the same time, you look at the stats on, these autonomous cars, or these autonomous vehicles, and it's, there's far less accidents than, when the humans do it sometimes, and so, or when the humans are driving them. So there is places where these machines, and these systems, they work, but the perception is that they don't, because of these highlighted issues that, sort of come along. And so that's, I think back to your Shail, your T and that trust is, how do you get that right level of trust there? And so, Shail, how are you seeing
I
this?
think, I think it's a little more than human in the loop. I think when we look at breakthroughs that are going to accelerate adoption, I agree with the human in the loop aspect of it. And look, I'm a big believer that silicon needs carbon, right? AI needs humans. Humans are not going away. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the real breakthrough isn't another algorithm or app. It's happening underneath that. And what I mean by that is we're starting to see operational research, machine learning, predictive analytics, and neural networks start to weave themselves into a physical backbone of agriculture. The mills, the silos, the plants, the ports, and that convergence is creating something new. I like to call it the cognitive grid. Not too different from a Waymo example that you shared, Chuck, because there is a underlying grid aspect to Waymo as well. But this cognitive grid is a living network of intelligence where infrastructure itself, agriculture itself, just doesn't plant; it starts to think. A mill that can learn from every batch, right? A plant that optimizes itself mid shift. I'm talking about a manufacturing plant, or a port that anticipates congestion before it happens. It's quiet, it's quite profound, and I think it's happening right now. And for the first time, the world's food system isn't just producing, it's beginning to learn.
Yeah, get smarter for sure. So thinking about that, so that's a great segue. I'm going to ask just a couple questions about the future of AI in ag in particular. And so small businesses in ag, whether they're farmers or, distribution or manufacturers or whatever, greenhouse growers, do you feel like does AI help them or hurt them?
So
Relative to larger, like which ones does it benefit more, larger organizations or smaller organizations?
yeah, I think that's a hard question to answer because on different time horizons they help them differently. So I think we have to decouple the question and add the x-axis of time, which is the people with the most amount of data and new types of data will be more successful up front. But as you have more data, that will unlock the ability to get more precise, and the smaller farms will benefit from it, and then their localization will benefit more once those models are perfected. So the more data you have, the smarter and faster you learn, the better off you'll be in the short run. But the more you can then take that learning and be just as economically feasible and viable and profitable at a small scale, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and micro over time on a long enough time horizon, that eventually people are going to have hyper-local farming where they no longer have to deal with large-scale farms themselves. And the reason for that is from learning. And so short-term versus long-term, I don't know the time horizon of that, but the inevitability is there. And I think the idea that people should be trying to solve for the high and hard problem, as I call it. I read about this a lot, where you need a new type of data combined with AI to be able to have long-term lasting competitive advantages as a farm. Now, to go deeper into your question on the supply chain, this also leads to a lot of disintermediation of the supply chain and value chain. So if you are going to stay in business as a distributor, you're going to have a value-added service. And that value-added service is going to have to be continuously more and more valued to be able to maintain either the stronghold or the relationship with the customer or with the the provider, the solution provider. And thus, the more we see the democratization of knowledge in agriculture and getting more precise, you're also going to see the disintermediation of the value chain and supply chain in a way that relationships from producers and solution providers will be directly with growers and farmers. And that's going to become closer and closer. And so the supply chain itself and the value chain is going to get a lot shorter. So who loses in this? It's the people who are touching products for short periods of time and that are in the middleman situation. The people who are winning are going to be people who are the actual producers, and the consumers, and the people who, and maybe even like retailers, right? So that's the best way I try to describe it. As I think the inefficiencies are also going to get removed from this value chain and supply chain, and with people are going to be able to find that costs are going to be able to get driven down as well, based on the fact that we're losing probably 20 to 30% in our supply chain and value chain due to waste that will also disappear due to the ability for platforms, technology, and AI to remove that waste.
Yeah. And Shail, I'm going to change the question just a little bit for you. And so how do you see successful partnerships in this? Because I know you primarily, at least for now, focus on a lot of the larger organizations. How do you see, what does a successful partnership with these large organizations look like for you guys? And then I'm going to come back into a little bit more questions on the future. But how do you see those relationships being successful?
They vary, and there are multiple flavors of that, right? I do see opportunities where equipment and AI alliances come together. So think about equipment manufacturers partnering with AI firms to drive models that understand field variability, machine behavior, maintenance patterns, as an example. We see opportunities where processors and optimization startups come together, right? Fruit processors, millers, logistic providers, to focus more on production planning, routing, sustainability optimization, the one that I was talking about related to Swarm. Ag-focused LLM alliances, as an example, growers, processors, logistic firms, research institutions. University of Illinois is doing some interesting work. Virginia Tech is doing some interesting work as well, particularly around building large language models that speak agriculture and are trained in the ontology and lexicon of ag. And then there's cross value chain consortiums opportunities as well, multi-stakeholder alliances. We're talking about inputs, manufacturing, logistics, finance coming together to create this collective intelligence feeding to the broader cognitive grid that I was talking about. So multiple flavors of alliances out there.
Very nice. And so, all right, so we're starting to wind down here, but a couple quick questions. Adam, you want to add something?
Yeah, just one thing that I think is really important for your listeners to hear, and I realized I didn't close the loop on this, and Shail really hit on something that made me think of this. The food supply chain is fascinating because, yes, there was lots of problems in it, but as we start to see the collective groups work together, for those who are listening and don't know about this, the retailers are going out to producers, and same with people like Pepsi's going out to farmers. Walmart and Whole Foods are going to growers, right, in greenhouses, and they're setting up 10-year long-term supply chain agreements where they're off takes. So just as we saw in the power purchase agreement in power in energy, we're seeing produce purchase agreements that guarantee outcomes based on yields that you can deliver and based in the guarantee pricing that then allow us to start doing really consumer driven agriculture, right? We know consumers want more of X. As a retailer, we're going to go give an offtake agreement for 10 years to this farmer for Y. And I think that, to me, is something that a lot of people don't understand that's already happening, and that the retailers are going to consumers and asking them what they want. Consumers are demanding certain think of it as a demand-driven pull as opposed to a supply-driven push that is starting to shift inside of the produce market in the way that these growers now are able to grow with guarantees because they have these long-term offtake agreements with these retailers to be able to try to meet consumer demand, because it's far higher for less fresh local produce than it is for supply. And I thought that was just kind of a cool tidbit that where's the future going? And I realized that after Shail said that, that'd be important for the listeners to understand that a lot of this is already happening.
Yeah. So that's our investment thesis actually, is the consumer led, sort of evolution here, right? Is a lot of where this is going. So thanks for reinforcing that from our standpoint. And actually the next question I was going to ask you is, if we fast forward 5 years, what does the, integrated farm look like? What standard practices are sort of, what will standard practices be that are novel today? And, I think one of the things you just talked about is business model there, is that they are going to have these sort of longer term, offtake opportunities with, the large retailers who have the consumer, coming to their location, but also have this, know what the consumer is looking for and what the consumer pull is, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's fascinating. How do you, Shail, are you seeing that these, these supply chains are getting shorter, and that there's, people are trying to figure out how to, bypass?
Definitely seeing that. I also think that, for the longest time, the land taught us how to grow, and now we're teaching it how to think. And the future of agriculture isn't just automation; it's contextually aware action, and that's critically important. Sensors, models, digital twins. We touched on all of those. Will run quietly in the background, learning the rhythm of agriculture, rhythm of the land. But before a farmer or agri-food company makes a move, the system will have already tested hundreds of scenarios: rain, price, yield, labor, and surface the next best step. And that's where I see the future going if we fast forward 5 years from now.
Yeah. And how can AI change the economics of the small farmer, the grower, or even the larger grower? Like how is it gonna benefit them and help them be more profitable? Because a lot of the farms are getting larger. There's consolidation. Many farmers have off farm income that they need to do to survive. We talked at the beginning about increased, certainly climate stress on some of these locations or some of these geographies, as well as increased input costs. Like, do you see AI being able to bring solutions that help farmers, one, make more money, and two, ultimately control food prices?
Adam, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I think we not only do we have to look at what's going to change, we have to look at what's not going to change over the next 10 years. And so what we know is not going to change. Consumers are always going to want better prices, and farmers are always going to want higher prices. So what that means is that you're going to have to find efficiencies. And so we think that our hypothesis here is that the value added services of AI have to drive margin gains, and they have to fundamentally shift the economics for farmers to be able to maintain the profitability they want to target and where they want to focus. And so from that perspective, we expect it to shift the economics in a way that can not only optimize yield, but also lower costs. In that way, when consumers are continuously complaining about prices being too high, that pressure is always going to be there. And so you have to find a way to make sure that your costs are well handled and efficiency is maximized. And AI is that. In Pareto, humanity took the 80% of value with 20% of the effort, because no person can measure every single data point. Now with machine learning and AI and LLMs, you can get that final 20% that took a lot more understanding, a lot more context, and start getting those efficiency gains out, because that's the only answer to be able to maintain profitability while you have the consumer world hammering on your head saying your prices is too high. Meanwhile, farmers are barely saying, I'm just trying to eat. I can barely put food on the table, right? And so something has to give. And the thing that's going to give there is the fact that we have a lot of waste in our value chain, a lot of waste in our supply chain. And that's how we go about solving this problem.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really about, the profit won't come from scale alone. It'll come from precision and having the ability to reduce waste, increase efficiency, drive resilience on the farm, and more importantly, participation. Right, when intelligence becomes scalable, where small producers, farmers, co-ops can have access to the same decision power that global players do with AI. I think that creates a significant differentiating advantage for them and improves economics as well.
So, what does success look like for each of you? Where do you see, like, what, like, when you've done what? How are you, like, putting a flag in it and saying that's success?
Yeah, look, success for me is simple. It's proof in the field. It's a grower saving money because their plant adapted faster. It's a mill hitting service levels because the truck stopped sitting idle. That's success. When intelligence moves the needle, and in the real world, that is absolute success. Not a pilot, not a headline, but an impact you can measure in yield, cost, in time, and trust. I always tell my team, right, if it doesn't make the decision clearer or faster or improves what happens next after that decision, it's not intelligence, it's noise.
Adam, what does success look like for you?
So for us, everything is about a positive sum thinking game. We don't think as the greenhouse industry, how do we fight within the greenhouse industry? We think the success looks like increasing the GDP of the greenhouse industry. Fresh local produce is not going anywhere. It's growing every single year. Consumers want more of it. The only thing that's keeping us from that is managing the risk, right? So the success means that we're able to give financial instruments, and there's no such thing as crop insurance for growers today inside the greenhouse industry. So how do I increase my production knowing that I'm taking a higher risk because there's no crop insurance because we have a roof over our head? Meanwhile, over 60% of tomatoes that we eat in the supermarket today are grown in greenhouses, over 30% of cucumbers, over 30% of peppers. So we know the world's demanding it, but we're not adapting fast enough to it. And so the zero sum game that we like to avoid is everyone fighting between the industry. The reality is all produce that can be grown inside the greenhouses needs to be 60 to 70% of the entire market over time. So the rising tide lifts all ships. Success looks like increasing the GDP consistently over the next 10 years. So that way everybody succeeds and everyone gets fresh local produce. That's what we're focused on.
That's phenomenal. Nice.
Excellent.
And so, for farmers listening, what's one piece of advice you'd give them about approaching AI and how they might work with it in agriculture?
Who do you want to go
Adam?
first?
Sure. For farmers, we recommend aligning incentives. So if you're nervous about adopting a technology, make sure that you align incentives and make sure that success is essentially guaranteed for you. We believe that the way you look at an operating model and the way you look at adopting AI has everything to do with how successful you'll be. So taking a skeptical approach will always make it a slower adoption than taking an enthusiastic approach. And so it's not about farmers caring about AI, it's about farmers caring about the outcome. And AI is just a tool. And if someone can tell you they can give you that outcome, let them do it for you. And because farming is such high risk, references are always important. Talk to references, talk to people who've also worked with these companies, because it's a way for you to either, if you want to be an early adopter and you want to be that reference, get a good deal. If you want to be able to talk to the reference and pay non-discounted pricing, do that. But the reality is you have to be able to continuously A/B test and continuously try to use new tools to be able to give you margin efficiencies. Otherwise, you run the risk of falling behind. The last thing I'll leave you with is, when you think about AI and you think about data as a farmer, one of the most important things to remember is that the beginning of time for your experience as a grower, as an agronomist, is when you started to be on the farm and learn. So even if you're not 100% sure how you're going to use your information and data, the idea that you're capturing it and you're standardizing it and you're integrating it, and how you use it will change over time. But the beginning of time for your farm and the beginning of time for your AI that you turn on will be when you first integrate and put that data together. So it cannot go back and look at what happened to you 30 years ago because it doesn't remember that. It will go back to when you first turned it on and you first used it, and that'll be the beginning of its memory. And so the sooner you do that, the more optimization and the more value you can bring for your farm over time. And so there's no excuse to not start now to ensure that the beginning of time for whatever AI model you use in the future starts today.
Shail, what's your advice for farmers
Yeah,
approaching AI?
my advice for farmers listening and thinking about approaching AI is start small. Don't wait. Start now. Don't wait for the perfect data or the perfect tools. Pick one decision that costs you time, costs you money or sleep, and see how AI can help you make that decision better and faster. You don't need to understand the math. You just need to understand the value. And the farmers who win with AI aren't the ones who know the most tech. They're the ones who learn the fastest. So treat AI like a new hire, train it, test it, make it earn your trust. And just remember, AI doesn't replace your experience, it compounds it.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I do feel like it needs to be a top down, like everyone needs to be using it and experimenting with it and trying it. Because it is, it's not, yes, I'm certainly biased in the tech space, but at the same time, it is a much more approachable technology than any we've had ever, I think, from that standpoint. So, Adam, Shail, thank you both tremendously. Really appreciate your time today. It's a fabulous conversation. I'm learning so much and seeing how, different aspects of our industry and where we invest are starting to embrace it. And it's really exciting to see. And I think there's going to be some fantastic, opportunities for both of your firms, obviously, but also for your customers as well. So thank you both.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks for having us, Chuck.